Welcome to the original and the best Power Hour with Alex Burr and Dylan Hughes, members and podcasts of the Running Hook Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of the Alex and Dylan Basketball Power Hour. Dylan Hughes in the tradition of throwing curveballs when you expect fastballs. Rank these announcers 1 to 3. Mike Breen, Kevin Harlan, or Ian Eagle?
Ian Eagle is hard for me to pass up at number 1. And then I'm probably going Mike Breen 2, Harlan 3.
The Harlan disrespect is real.
You know, it's the more I watch League Pass, the more I realize just how good a lot of these broadcast teams are. I mean, the entire broadcast team in Atlanta is fantastic. Fantastic. Every time I watch them, I'm really enjoying it. Charlotte, very good. And I don't even know most of these people's names, but every time I watch, I'm like, this is really good. Toronto, very good. You know, there's just a few standouts. And obviously, every time you watch the Knicks, it's just you don't even watch the game. If you're not interested in seeing Julius Randle dribble the air out of the ball or RJ Barrett go 6 of 18 from the field, just sit back and listen because the chemistry of that team is so great. And same for Brooklyn, man. They have a rotating cast of color people, but Ian Eagle's always there, and he's always fantastic.
All right, so let me shout out Sacramento too, because they have Mark Jones.
Yeah, that was a great addition.
I don't remember who the guy was before. He was good, but he was racist. Grant Napier,
yeah.
He was good, but he was. Listen, his personality didn't jibe with the Sacramento Kings, shall we say. So he had to get out of there. And what better guy to replace him with? Mark Jones, really underrated announcer. I have to say, one of the best. Just before we stop this discussion on announcers, I have to know, for the sake of our friendship, Hubie Brown, yay or nay?
You know, I went to dinner with my parents on Saturday night, and I don't remember what the hell the game was. It was on TV. But, the bars, they have those big TVs hanging up. I'm like, oh, might as well see what's going on here. They showed Hubie Brown on the screen. And I'm like, how? How is this man still around? I love, I have very nostalgic feelings about Hubie Brown because, he's been one of the best, I think, breakdown type of guys, analysts for a long time. But, man, every time I see him, I'm just like, please go spend time with your family. He's just a little bit too old for this. But from the whole picture, I still have a lot of respect for Hubie Brown.
I just love his passion for the game. He's not young, but how people say Tony Romo talks about football is the way Hubie Brown talks about basketball. And that's why I appreciate him. He's so passionate about it. He knows what he's talking about. He is by all accounts a very smart basketball coach. And I feel like he has a lot of knowledge to impart, Dylan Hughes. I know, there are some people in our direct circle who despise Hubie Brown. Caleb Lynn. And that, it sucks, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and move on to the news for the week. So in injury news, Myles Turner is out indefinitely with, I believe, a plantar injury in his big toe. I'd never heard of that happening in your big toe before. But Dylan, it sounds like Myles is going to be out for the rest of the season, and you're just saying let the tanks roll through.
Yeah, this has been the disaster season from hell, okay? The way the East is shaping up right now, they're in the perfect spot to just let go of that balloon, let it float off in the sky, wave goodbye to it, and strap in for a good pick. Okay, Myles was the last time they've had a lottery pick, and that was 5 years ago now. And before him, I think it was Paul George, 6. And I think before that it was Paul George. So when they get into the lottery, they do a pretty good job, but they just never get there. So this is a really really good draft. And if I'm able to throw on a Davion Mitchell jersey next year, I don't think I'll be able to become happier. And that's no disrespect to my future wife and children, but that the Davion Mitchell Pacers jersey will be enshrined in my personal Hall of Fame. So I think that's the goal here.
All right, what'll make you happier? Davion Mitchell in a Pacers jersey or getting to watch a whole series of Mikal Bridges guarding Luka Doncic?
Davion Mitchell would last a lot longer. And we're going to see plenty of Mikal Bridges versus Luka Doncic over the years, I'm assuming. So I'm going to have to stick with Davion.
It's close. I could see the conflict in your eyes when you were answering the question. So
it is close, but that's, my heart knows what it wants, and it's Davion Mitchell.
Well, we got to shout out Myles because he is ending the season averaging 3.4 blocks a game. Just really, really dominant defensively when he did play. But, this awful season just takes another victim. And even I don't see any reason for him to come back and play unless he, is healthy by the play-in. But take it slow with him. He's a big guy. Feet injury are nothing to mess with. Joakim Noah had feet problems. He also had knee problems. He had a lot of problems, sadly. You just don't mess with big guys in their feet. And that's pretty tried and true. So let him take his time and come back. You're not really playing for anything right now, as sad as it is to say. It's kind of a loser mentality, but at this point, we're 7/8 done through the season, something like that. There's just no reason for him to come back and injure himself further. So that's another thing. And then the other injury I want to talk about is James Harden had a little bit of a setback. I think he has a hamstring injury. He's going to be out indefinitely as well. It sounds like they're going to, he won't be back till at least May 11th, which would put them right before the playoffs. Dylan, should we be concerned about the Nets? Kevin Durant's been off and on. Kevin Durant hurt himself coming back in his last game. I don't even know when he's going to play. And then Kyrie has been the healthiest of the bunch this year. And I would not have thought I would say that coming into the season. Should we be concerned about the Brooklyn Nets?
I was thinking about that yesterday. I'm like, oh my God, Kyrie's been the healthiest of this team this year. And if Kyrie is ever the healthiest player on a team, that is not a good sign because that dude has some sort of a knee injury every single season. And he's already had some stuff earlier in the year that was just kind of minor. And a lot of it was personal stuff he was missing time for. But it's tough, man. And we're going to talk about the Bucks later. And if you just have one of those guys missing against the Bucks or any of these teams, your chances of winning go down significantly. And with as much time as KD has missed this year, I mean, I was thinking about this too. I was thinking back to some of the other Achilles injuries, and we've been debating whether KD is going to be the same after this. But the thing we never really discussed was the season after the Achilles injury is never really that great either. He could bounce back next year, but it's your body is just fucked for a year and a half to 2 years. And I'm starting to wonder at this point if his body is really slowly working back. And in the process of working back, it's having injuries along the way. And, really the playoffs is all that matters. And maybe him missing time right now is going to help, but it's definitely worrisome. And I'm not too worried about Harden. I mean, he's battled through stuff before and been fine. So I guess we'll see on that. But the KD thing is still the one I'm worried about the most.
Do you want to guess how many games Kevin Durant has played this year, Dylan Hughes?
It's got to be less than 30.
That's correct.
Let's say 25.
You are almost right on the money. 24 games.
Oh, wow.
For Kevin Durant. When we did the All-NBA pod halfway through the season, he was at 19. And he's played 5 games since the All-Star break. Yep. It's not looking good. I think this season, the lack of a regular All-Star break, first of all, I know they just expanded the All-Star break in the last couple of years. I think that was really helping guys. And then the lack of an offseason. And no, Kevin Durant didn't play at all last year. But I think it's just throwing everything off. And we're seeing, we'll just go ahead and transition, right? So we have a lot of guys coming back from injury that have been out for a little while. Anthony Davis being one of them. I saw a stat, or not a stat, just a timeline thing. The offseason was 10 weeks. Anthony Davis missed 9.5 weeks. He had a 71-day offseason. He missed 67 days. So, I'm glad AD's coming back. He's going to be coming back tonight. We're recording this. We're recording this on Thursday night, and he'll be coming back against the Mavericks tonight. So that'll be fun. LaMelo Ball has been cleared for contact, I believe, in practice, and he should be back within the next couple days at this point. You said 7 days a couple days ago. He should be playing next week. So Charlotte should get a bolster out of that, especially since they've struggled since losing Hayward and LaMelo. And then Dylan Hughes, the patron saint of this podcast, is coming back. That's right. Jaren Jackson Jr. made a season debut on April 21st against our hated Los Angeles Clippers, and he had 15, 8, 4 blocks, and I believe he did not play very much. But Dylan Hughes, the Grizzlies are soaring right now, and you have to think that Jaren Jackson is a huge addition to this Grizzlies roster.
The fact that they've been this good without him has been one of the biggest surprises this season to me. I mean, the Grizzlies were ahead of expectations last year, and they just missed out on the playoffs. And this year, I mean, they look like they're definitely pretty much a lock for the play-in game. But they may even be a little bit better than that. Like they could very easily finish as like the 7th or 8th seed. So I'm really excited, man. Like this, we've been waiting for this team to be healthy forever, even going back to last year. And Jaren Jackson is like, you could still argue he's the best prospect on this team. So what they've been able to do with Ja leading the way and all these other guys contributing, putting Triple J back in the mix is really going to be a big boost for them.
And Dylan, so if you listen to the Ringer NBA show at all, Chris Vernon is from Memphis. And Chris Vernon on one of the Ringer NBA shows said that Jaren has gotten taller.
What the fuck?
So he's a 7-footer now, because I believe he was listed at 6'11" beforehand. So,
well, he's only 18. He's still got a few years of growth in him.
Him and Jason Tatum are like the forever he's this young, because Jaren has been in the league a year longer than Ja Morant and is younger than Ja Morant. It's why, like, Ja was drafted as a sophomore, yeah, but like I think it's like a full year, even in spite of. It's just crazy how young Jaren is, but I think that he's going to have an advantage because of that. And I really want to see, because this Grizzlies team needs bounce off the dribble, right? Like they just need something off the dribble. Like they have Ja and they have Dylan Brooks, who, I'm not particularly high on, but I don't hate. And then what else do they have in terms of off the dribble juice? They don't really have a whole lot. And so I really want to see that. I really want to see a Melton. I want to see a Melton, Ja, Kyle Anderson, Jonas, and Jaren lineup. I really want to see that. That would be fun. Just a lot of fun possibilities you could do with Jaren. But we are going to have the Grizzlies in a couple of weeks, and hopefully Jaren's minutes limit will be off by then, and we'll get to see him up and raring to go for the play-in game. So as it stands right now, the Grizzlies would play the Mavericks in the first play-in game. And then they'd be playing the winner of Golden State San Antonio, which, as we both could probably agree, Golden State will win that other play-in game because Dylan Hughes, I think it's safe to say San Antonio's season it's starting to look like it's donezo.
Yeah, man. They're crumbling at the seams right now, but I think we could have seen that coming.
Listen, shout out to the Spurs. Shout out to Dejounte Murray. You should have traded Rudy Gay and while you still had the chance. But let's go ahead and move on to our teams for the week. So our teams for the week are the Pistons, the Trailblazers, and the Bucks. We did skip the Bucks last week. That's why we switched them with the Pacers. And we are, I believe the last time we did this week, we did the Rockets, and we are skipping the Rockets entirely. So shout out to Houston. Shout out to Kevin Porter Jr. for being a real one. That's all I'll say. So the Detroit Pistons are languishing right now. They are currently third in the lottery odds at 18-41. Good for 15th in the Eastern Conference. They're weak. They actually had a pretty good week, Dylan. They started off the week by winning against Oklahoma City Thunder, 110-104. By the way, we should have a losing streak watch. If the Thunder's losing streak continues next week, we should just make a note of it every single week until they actually win a game. They're currently on a 12-game losing streak. Beat the Thunder 110-104. They got drubbed by Washington 121-100. They beat the Cavs 109-105, and then they lost to your Dallas Mavericks 117-127. So this team is entirely different from the first time we watched it. Literally completely different. I didn't see Jeremy Grant because I didn't watch the Mavericks game this week, and because he didn't play, and then I didn't see Plumlee either. So the games I watched were the Thunder and the Cavs games. I wanted to watch the Mavs game. I just didn't find time today. But Dylan, we got to talk about Killian Hayes. That's probably the biggest difference between the first time and this time. So he's an interesting prospect. I'm just curious to know, what do you think Killian Hayes' ceiling is? And what comps do you possibly have for him?
So I was having a little trouble watching or figuring out the comp. And as my brain works, it just starts clicking when I really sit back and watch. I wish I could give people access to my brain like it's a Google Doc or something. Can I share access to some of these files? Because it's kind of amazing how my brain just clicks things together it's like I have a stored database of every single basketball player I've ever seen, including children that I'll see at the local basketball court. My ability to remember basketball players and their style is really shocking to me. And the fact that I have not been hired as a scout by any team is really appalling. There's a certain team up north in Milwaukee that I think could utilize my mind. But that's another topic for another day. But so I'm sitting there watching Killian Hayes just slinging passes around the court like no one's even defending them, and just throwing lobs to people without even looking. And I'm like, okay, this is Lakers Lonzo Ball. That's what I'm seeing. Lonzo Ball on the Lakers, he wanted to shoot. He was shooting, but he kind of was figuring out that he wasn't as good as he was at UCLA. And he was more focused on just making really good passes, getting guys open, getting to the rim. And that's what I see out of Killian Hayes. It's Killian Hayes is a little bit more aware than Lonzo, I think. It's not that he's lacking confidence, but he recognizes the shot is not a big part of his game right now. And he's more focused on running pick and rolls and finding guys in transition. And as far as ceiling, it's just really tough because these guys without a shot, really hard to nail them down. SGA is one guy I just don't know what he's going to be. I know he's going to be good. He already is good. But the lack of shot, it's and it's the same with a guy like DeJounte Murray. You just don't know how good someone can be when they don't really have a pull-up jumper. So as far as ceiling, it's tough. I think he's definitely going to be a long-time starter, but can he ever be one of the three best players on a good team? I don't know. But at the very least, he's going to be a very productive player because his passing ability, he's going to get anyone that can jump, he's going to get them involved. And this Pistons team happens to have a handful of them. So, it's going to be really interesting to watch his development moving forward.
What did I text you? Killian Hayes hasn't met a lob that he hasn't liked. He loves throwing lobs. So the passing to me, and this is going to sound probably hyperbolic, but the way he's such a creative passer, it kind of reminds me of how Manu passes. And I'm not saying he's Manu, right? Because that is why, it's probably too much. But the way his vision and the way he throws passes, I think it's really good, right? The problem is, as you stated, no pull-up jumper. And really, he relies a lot on craft to even get shots up. So my comparison was a left-handed Minnesota, Ricky Rubio. I think that he's going to play in the league for a long time. He's got all the tools you want, right? He's got size. He's going to be able to defend. He can't defend right now. He's a rookie point guard. What do you expect? He's played 14 games. He's going he's got really amazing passing vision, right? And he's going to be able to get sling the ball all over the court wherever he wants it to. That to me, I think he's at baseline, right? Like Minnesota, Ricky Rubio before he tore his ACL, it's a very good player. And obviously after he tore his ACL and came back and where did he played in Utah and then Phoenix. So Ricky's always been a good player. I don't think that's a bad ceiling, or I don't even think that's Killian's ceiling. I think it's his floor, right? I think he could be Minnesota because you saw like the full court bounce pass, right? That was a crazy ass pass that just like no one would think to throw, like as a bounce pass too, especially. So I'm really excited to see him just sling passes all over the court for the foreseeable future in the NBA.
Yeah, when I was talking, I thought about Ricky too, because I'm thinking of guys around the league that don't really shoot but are still like involved a lot, and I think Ricky is like the staple of that kind of description. Like he's one of the only point guards in the league that has like everyone just knows he's not a good shooter, but he still gets big contracts and he's starting on teams. And I mean, it's explainable that he's like really never been on a playoff team for the most part. I think he was in Minnesota that one year.
Utah.
Or was he gone? He was in Utah. That's right. Yeah. So what it takes for him to get to damn near like a super team, not to say Utah's a super team, but there was a lot of talent on that team. Like, I mean, 2 All-Stars, you know, like, I don't know. That's the thing is like, if you don't have a shot, and Ricky can hit shots now, but he has to be fucking, no one is even close to me. Like I am literally the only guy on this side of the court. Those are the shots Ricky Rubio hits. And you don't get that many of those in a game in the NBA. So that's the worry. And again, not a bad floor because again, Ricky Rubio has been a starting point guard in the league for a long time now. Like he was in the same draft as Steph Curry. He's been starting ever since then. And Steph Curry has been around for a long time, if you need any reference point. So that is, it's, and that really just shows how important shooting is. And not that that's like a shocking revelation that you need to be able to shoot as a point guard in the NBA, but you know, that's just kind of a sign of the difference. Like if Ricky Rubio has been a 35%, shooter for his career, we would talk about him a lot different, but he just never became that. And this is a guy that's been one of the best passers and point of attack defenders, like at least at one point, and he still wasn't really considered in that high regard. So that right there just shows how important it is to shoot. And Killian's a lot more athletic, so maybe he'll be able to figure something else out. But I mean, obviously the shot is just what it's all going to come down to.
So I pulled up Ricky Rubio's basketball reference page. So for his career, Ricky is averaging 11 points a game, 7.7 assists, 1.8 steals, 39% from the field, 32% from three. And he gets to the free throw line 3.6 times a game, which honestly kind of feels high. Like, I think that at worst, you're a high quality backup point guard or a starter on a really shitty team, right? And I think, there's some value in that, like to be able to helm an offense. Now, would you like him to be able to shoot? Yes. I really want to see his offensive game progresses. I don't know whether if the shooting doesn't come, then he is Rubio nonstop, right? Like just as absolutely purely the case. But this is the thing. This is another stat from Ricky Rubio's basketball reference page. He's only come off the bench about 35 times in his whole career. So you're going to start somewhere. And guys like starting. So I think that there's something there. And he's 19. He's 19. He's played 14 games. So you hope to see, maybe next year, some progression, some, added scoring element or strength. Because he does need to put on some weight. He is very thin. But if he puts on some weight and he develops a jumper, I think that there's a lot there you could work with.
One thing that I don't know if they've already announced their plans for this, but I would love if there was a summer league before next season. I mean, it may have to be called a fall league because I guess technically summer, but I think I saw the other day that free agency is slated for like August 2nd. So around then, I mean, I guess you'd only be like a month late, really. They're a month behind for where they usually are. So it's not that big of a deal. It's not as bad as it was last year. But if they can get a summer league, and summer league breeds a lot of like, this guy is better than he really is type of takeaways. But if you really look back, I remember, I think it was the same summer league that Donovan Mitchell and Kyle Kuzma first played in. And a lot of the stuff those guys showed have stuck around, right? So it's not like every single person that's good in the summer league is just fake. It's not like it's not real. And I would just love to see Killian Hayes. It's just a good place to get reps. And like, because the summer league is damn near like an advanced G League, right? So you're playing guys that are pretty much better than G League or at very worst G League. So they're not bad reps. Like, they're not NBA reps, but they're close. And if a guy like Killian Hayes was able to get in there and start throwing some 3-point shots up, then, you know, I think that would help his game a lot and help the Pistons kind of figure out exactly where they want to go with his development. But, you know, whether the NBA plans to do that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the summer league point is definitely a good one because he just needs something, right? And obviously he got hurt very early in the season, like 7 games into the season. I think he didn't play a whole lot. And, you know, hopefully he gets to play out the string here the last like 15 or so games. And then, yeah, summer league. I think a lot of these guys would benefit from summer league, right? Like, it's amazing that Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart have come in and been as good as they have been. And we're not really going to talk about them a whole lot this week, but Isaiah Stewart, man, that dude's a dog. But they could use a summer league too. Like, this whole team could use a summer league. I think Dwayne Casey is going to stick around there. I think he seems like a good fit for this rebuild. And, you know, I like them having a good coach. I mean, if he wants to go somewhere else and try to coach a playoff team, you know, I wouldn't be mad at that either because I like Dwayne Casey. I think he's a good coach. And I think he kind of got screwed because his team won a championship with when they acquired Kawhi. He didn't have the chance to coach Kawhi. But I think that this team, like, I think that a lot of the guys that they have could really use a summer league. And like, then you add a top 3, 4, or 5 pick. Like, I think the worst pick they could end up with is like 7. And like, that means you're going to get a really good player, and they need all the talent they can get on this team. So I want to see that summer league. I think on that note, let's go ahead and move on to my next question for the Pistons. My next question for the Pistons is simple. Will Jeremy Grant play out this contract in Detroit? He signed a 3-year contract. He's going to have 2 years left on it. He is going to make $20 million a year. That's basically good starter money in this NBA economy. And, you know, it just doesn't feel like he fits with what they're trying to do. Like, it kind of feels like you're kind of doing 2 roads at once. Like, you have this guy, Jeremy Grant, who needs a lot of shots, and he's probably more than happy to take them. But like, the efficiency really isn't where it was. Like, because when we first had the Pistons, he was at like 39% from 3 and like 45% from the field or something like that. Now he's down to 43% and 35.7% from 3, which is reasonable. You know, 22.5 points a game ain't bad for a whole season, right? For 51 games. But like, I just can't help but feel, Dylan, like he's not going to play out this contract in Detroit.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they went either way, because you can kind of see it with these rebuild teams. Like, they need one proven, like, really solid guy. And I mean, you don't have to. Like, hell, the Thunder have just decided that they don't need that. And hey, it's working for them. They've lost 12 in a row. So, you know, winning is clearly not their objective. But I don't think the Pistons plan on going down that extreme of a hole. And, you know, I guess it depends on what they do in the draft. Like, if they end up with Evan Mobley, you probably want to just start Evan Mobley at the 4 and maybe you trade Grant. I don't know. Or maybe, I mean, he started the season playing the 3, I think. So I'm not sure. But of course, then there's Sadiq Bey, you know. So, you know, like you said, he kind of gets in the way. But I don't know. Like, if they end up with a guard in the draft, maybe they're like, you know what, we'll at least keep him through the trade deadline and sniff around. but a guy making $20 million a year that's playing, that has proven that he can score a lot of points, is going to be very sought after. And especially in the offseason when there's a bunch of cap space available, making trades for guys of big contracts like this are not that difficult. And hell, I'm just thinking of a team like the Celtics. Like the Celtics, I think, have done a good job piecing together a roster for this season. But next year, man, they're going to need more oomph. And Jeremy Grant is a guy that I think would fit in well there because, you know, like you said, he's happy to take all the shots in Detroit right now. But his entire career leading up to this, he's been at best like the fourth best guy on the floor. So it would not be foreign for him to just go right back to that. And hey, he's going to happen to be making twice as much as he would have anyway prior. So, you know, I don't think that he'll play out the whole contract, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's at least there until the trade deadline. But again, depending on what happens in the draft, he very well could be gone by this summer.
Yeah, and I think that it's just the business of the NBA, you know, and like it's good for him that he got paid, and good for him that he's going to get to take as many shots as he wants to. Like, I'm really happy for you, Jeremy Grant. But I think that like the disconnect for me is just like, you're right. He was never anything more than a fourth option. And listen, what I think this Detroit stint will do for Jeremy Grant is that teams will actually take him seriously as an like on ball creator. And if he's your like second or third guy instead of your, you know, first guy, I think he could actually be something. Right. But before, you know, if you went to the Nuggets and said, hey, let Jeremy Grant take 15 shots a game, you would have laughed at him. You would have said, you're stupid. You would have been like, why? This guy can't do anything like that. And we know he can now. And so I think that he's going to really benefit from that next time. So maybe that's one positive that's coming out of this Jeremy Grant Detroit situation, other than him, you know, getting absolutely massive contract. I would tend to agree. If not next year's trade deadline, then definitely the one after that, like as a stretch run, like kind of guy for like maybe 2 second-round picks. But if you trade him next year and the team gets a year and a half of him, like I think that that's a win-win for the Pistons and whoever trades him. And I think actually, I just thought of something, Dylan Hughes. Should I save it for now or should I save it for the next team? If you're Portland, why wouldn't you trade Jeremy Grant or trade for Jeremy Grant for CJ McCollum? And like, especially if in that Mobley scenario, I think it could work like where you give CJ a lot of shots and then like sneak Bay. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing. Maybe like some sort of 3-team trade where Grant goes back to Portland and you give Grant some of CJ's shots and then, you know, maybe see if you can't get the shots from somewhere else. I think Jeremy Grant in Portland wouldn't be a terrible destination.
Yeah. I mean, we've been trying to get a 4 in Portland for, I don't know. When did LaMarcus leave? Basically ever since then, we've been trying to get a 4 in Portland. We wanted Kevin Love there. We wanted Blake Griffin there, even Tobias Harris. So, you know, that makes sense to me. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd have to sit and think, but I really want to sit down and do some fake CJ McCollum trades because I think there's a lot of ideas out there because like a spark plug type of creator like him is going to fit in on any team. And I want him to end up in Philly so bad somehow. I don't know what, but the thing is, I don't want them to give up Tobias Harris at the same time. So it's a really tough thing that I'm working through mentally to try to make that puzzle fit together. But you know, there's a lot of options out there, and Jeremy Grant is the type of guy they do need. They need scoring from forwards. And they got it in Norm Powell now, but is Norm Powell going to be there next year? I don't know. And, you know, you can easily slide Covington down to the 3 and then put Grant up there. And because, like, the way the West works, you need guys that can score down low. And you need guys that can have, you know, pull up jump shots. And Portland just has not had that. I mean, Portland has just had a bunch of off-ball backdoor cut, catch and shoot 3 guys at the 4 and the 3. And it's not enough. Like, as good as Dame is, it's not enough. And as good as CJ is, it hasn't been enough. And I think a guy like Jeremy Grant would definitely be good. I don't know whether that's the way they'll end up going, and we can talk about this more with Portland, but I mean, that is the type of trade that would interest me. It's just Detroit, would they want CJ McCollum? And you said it could be a 3-team trade, obviously, but that's, that doesn't really fix the problem of, I mean, it gives you a really good guard, which I think they need another guard. So, but I don't know, maybe you turn CJ into something and to break it up into some younger guys somewhere else.
Yeah, just something where because Portland just really needs you're right. Al-Farouq Aminu hasn't cut it. I hate to say it. Robert Covington, it's not Robert Covington's fault. We'll get to that more in the Portland section, but Jeremy Grant fits that team to a T, right? They really needed Aaron Gordon. I'd say they probably needed Aaron Gordon more than the Nuggets did, which the Nuggets needed him a lot. But listen, I think that, I like Jeremy Grant, and I think that wherever he goes next, it'll be a fruitful destination for his next team. So let's go ahead and move on to our final Pistons big picture question. And that is, how are you liking the second draft guys in Detroit? So we made a point a couple of pods ago, how Detroit, we really like how they're just, acquiring young talent. And they're, second draft guys like Frank Jackson, Josh Jackson. They did that with the Derrick Rose trade and Dennis Smith Jr. How are you liking how they've approached that second draft approach in Detroit?
I've loved it, man. Like, this is how you build a team right here. And I think every young team that's kind of tanking has some success with it. But, I mean, I think Detroit's done a great job. And, even if you go back to last year, they did it with Christian Wood. And it was just, unfortunately for them, either he didn't want to stay or they didn't want to pay him. Either way, understandable from both sides. But, Christian Wood had a slight 1 or 2 weeks in New Orleans where he was looked at. But before that, he wasn't really noticed much. And then he goes to Detroit last year and is awesome and gets a huge contract from Houston. And now they're doing it Josh Jackson was kind of the first one, I think, where, he started to show some, and this isn't even second draft for Josh Jackson. This is third or fourth draft with him, but he was good in Memphis. He wasn't great, but he definitely was showing some promise. And it seemed like he just kind of needed to get out of Phoenix, and it wasn't a good fit for him. And he's been good, man. He's had some really, really good games this year. There's been games where he's taken over, in big moments. There was a game earlier in the season where he had 30 points and had half of them in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, he's been really good. And, the 3-point shot's still not really there, but he's just so good at getting to the rim and finishing. He's got really great touch around the rim, and he's so he's got such great touch, but he's also really fierce. He's a guy that can bully his way there, but not he's not doing too much where he misses the shot at the rim. So he's got a really great handle on his attack with the ball. So I've really enjoyed watching him. And Frank Jackson, this is a guy that I have liked since, I liked him in New Orleans a lot. I always saw him as a less talented Malcolm Brogdon, just kind of the way he handles the ball. He's not as good a passer. He's not as good a defender. He's not really as mobile. Not that Malcolm Brogdon's super athletic anyway, but he's just as far as scoring, I just see a lot of similarities in their games. And Frank Jackson, first of all, I didn't even know New Orleans, did they trade him or let him go? Because I didn't know he was in Detroit until the beginning of the year. I completely missed in the offseason somehow that he wasn't there anymore. But I liked him in New Orleans a lot. I thought he was a nice complimentary guy, and he's had some games this month where he's just unstoppable from the field. He's very efficient, good shooter. He's just not much of a passer. He's going to be one of those guys that's just a complimentary scorer, which is good. That's not a bad thing, but he's always going to be a bench guard. But as far as second draft, that's a hit to me. And Dennis Smith has been here and there. They have so many young guys bouncing in and out of the rotation like Sekou Doumbouya, like just plays every once in a while, just because the way their forward situation is playing out. So, there's just a lot of these guys we don't always get to see, but I really like the way they're handling it. Obviously, I could go on and on about Hamidou Diallo. I mean, and like those are the moves that winning organizations make, right? Get a guy that's proven himself, and you might have to pay him a little bit this summer, but you're not paying anyone else, so who cares except for Blake Griffin. So, I just really like their approach, and that's why I think over the next few years they're really going to have a lot of success.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the respective heads there. This is just an organization that's starting to do things right after not doing things right for so long. Like last year, they were probably the most talent bare roster in the whole league. And now you just go like up and down the roster. Like you obviously have Jeremy Grant, you have Delon Wright got you. Never mind. You have Mason Plumlee and Corey Joseph as the vets, right? And then you have Sadiq Bey, Killian Hayes, and Isaiah Stewart as your big guy, or as your guys you drafted, right? Like as your 3 first-round picks. And then you add you trade Mikhailuk for Diallo, which we both agree the Pistons won that trade nonstop. You signed Josh Jackson to a nice little contract. I believe Frank Jackson's on a 2-way right now, but he's certainly not playing. He's playing more than a 2-way would suggest, and he actually had a really big role in that Cavs game this week. Tyler Cook is showing some interesting stuff. I don't really know a whole lot about him. Saban Lee is interesting. I don't know a whole lot about him, and I'm not going to claim to, but I like the flashes that I've seen. It's just like, just so much more talented, right? Like they turned Derrick Rose into Dennis Smith Jr. And if Dennis Smith doesn't work, then whatever, like Dennis Smith is a restricted free agent this summer, and you're definitely going to be able to not lowball him, but you're going to be able to bring him back for cheaper than like, some other lottery picks, like, right? Like he's going to be cheaper compared, like hell, he's going to be cheap compared to Markelle for sure. Right. He's going to be cheap compared to all the other point guards picked in that range in that 2017 draft. So if you lose, you don't really even lose that much. So that's why I like these moves for the Pistons. And then if they hit on their draft pick this summer, or I guess, I don't know, it'll be like late summer. The draft is like July something. I don't remember what, I think it's the 29th. Just crazy. We're only going to have like another 2-month off season again, Dylan. It's going to be, brutal. That is what it is though. But I think that the Pistons, to me, I really like the direction of this franchise. I think that they're not going to be good for probably another 2-3 years. But after that 2-3 years, you have something. And I'll be curious to see like what their young core grows into.
Yeah, I mean, like the foundation is being set right now. And I think this draft is really important, I think, because as we've talked about pretty much every week at this point, like this is going to be a really good draft. And even if they get unlucky and fall to like 6 or 7, they're going to get a great player. So, but on the flip side, if they end up in the top 3, they're going to have like a superstar type guy. And I mean, I think any of the 3 top guys would be a great fit there. Like that, the way their roster is shaped out, like they could slide any of those guys in and be really happy. So, but even if you move to like the next tier of guys, I think, and I don't know a ton about those guys, but I know there's like some forwards in there and some guards, and that's what they need. So like you're going to be set no matter what. And I mean, like you said, it's going to take some time to materialize, but I think in like 2023, we may start having some central discussions about who's the top dog.
Yeah. I mean, this central division is like pretty much all on the up and up. The team that's probably in the most dire position is honestly the Bulls, because Levine's an unrestricted free agent after the 2023 season, or is it next year? I think he might be an unrestricted free agent next year. And then Vooch is unrestricted in 2023. So if both of those guys leave, then they're in the most dire straits by far. It'll be interesting to see. But then the Cavs, we agree, have a bright future. The Pistons, the Pacers, and then the Bucks, their core is locked in for the foreseeable future as well. So it's going to be an interesting time. We'll talk about the Bucks in a little bit, but Dylan, I think it's a good time as any to move on to your Portland Trailblazers. They're currently 32-26, good for 6th in the Western Conference. They are not doing well right now. They've really had a rough stretch. Their last 8 games, they've gone 2-6. It's really not gone well for the Blazers. So last Friday, they beat the San Antonio Spurs 107-106. They then lost to the Charlotte Hornets 101-109 in a game that was not really that close. Even it was a blowout in other portions of the game. They then lost to the Clippers 113-112. And then they lost again to the Nuggets 106-105. Dame was out a good portion of those games. He did come back last night against the Nuggets, I should say, but still, Dylan, the Blazers, just before we get into the big picture questions, they're kind of scuffling. And I think it's safe to say out of like the top 7 teams, they're definitely looking the weakest right now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that as soon as they get healthy, they just run into like a buzzsaw, and like every team in the West right now is clicking pretty much. Even the fucking Kings are dropping like 130 a night. It's like you really have no day off in the West. And hell, even Minnesota's been playing well lately. Like, it's like you really get no days off. And, you know, to be fair to Portland, the past couple games, like last night, just barely lost to Denver, which, by the way, really bad offensive game last night. Like, I saw I think it was 106-105. I'm like, okay, this should be a good defensive game. Maybe a little bit, mostly just terrible offense. Like, I looked at the box score after, and I was like, it just felt like the second half was all Jokic. And I looked at the box score, and it doesn't really suggest that Jokic was like the only good player in that game, but it felt like that in the second half, which is not surprising. The way that things happen nowadays is, hey, Jokic was the only good player on the floor. Like, wow. And then the Clippers game, you know, they didn't have Kawhi, but the Blazers didn't have Nurkic or Dame. So it was a valiant effort, I would say. But yeah, man, like this Western Conference is tough. And even if you slide down to like the Warriors, you don't know what Steph's going to do. It doesn't really matter what the rest of the guys on the team do. If Steph drops 10 threes a night, you know, they're going to have a chance. And all the way up from the Warriors up to Utah, it's like it's just a tough battle every night. Doesn't matter who's on the team. So Portland is just in a really tough spot right now.
Is it crazy to say that right now, of the top 12 teams in the West, the 3 worst teams are Sacramento. Listen, they can drop 130 on you, but they are also going to give up 131. They're absolutely awful on defense. They're 2-8 in their last 10. They've really been bad since they we've got the Kings at their only good points of the season so far, I would say. And then the Trailblazers and the Spurs, like those 3 are probably like the worst 3 teams right now in the West. I mean, New Orleans can't get out of their own way, but I don't think New Orleans is bad. I just think that they're young and / bad roster management for the most part. And then Golden State, Steph is just on fire right now. I don't know how. It doesn't seem like last night he was 18-8-7, and that's the worst game he's had in a month. Like, he just has been like absolutely on fucking fire lately. But I'm concerned about the Blazers. We were looking through their standings earlier. They're 8-18 against teams that are above 500. Like, it's not really looking good for them at all in the playoffs. I think the Clippers, like, they won that game off a monster PG performance. And if they can't stop PG, there's no way they can stop Kawhi and PG. Like, let's just be blunt, Dylan. I think that it's going to be I think it's going to be a gentleman's sweep if those 2 teams play in the first round. I love Dame. You know I do. But it's just a terrible, terrible matchup for the Blazers.
Yeah, Dame's going to have his 50-point night, and that'll be their win. But otherwise, it's going to be tough. And I mean, just coming off that Jeremy Grant discussion, like that's the thing is they don't have the forward depth to match these teams. And it's like every single team out West has some sort of like really nice nucleus of forwards. I mean, like starting at the top, you know, Utah, just great shooting from Bogey, Ingles, Royce O'Neal, and then Phoenix has all their young guys, and then Jay Crowder, and Denver, Michael Porter Jr., Gordon, like all the way down. You could name off every single team that's in the race has really nice forward depth, and like having big guys that can dribble and score, off the dribble or at the rim is huge. And the Blazers, like aside from Norm Powell, which I do think Norm Powell is going to help them a lot in that area, but it's not going to be nearly enough to match what they're going to have to match. So it's going to be a very sad exit for the Blazers when that time comes.
One more thing before we move on to our big picture questions. Covington, if this defense was like 20th instead of 29th, right now they're allowing 117.5 points per 100 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. That is good for 29th in the league. Sacramento is the only team that's worse. Covington, man, he's not like an on-ball defender. Like he's not on-ball ace. But my God, that dude is so elite off the ball on defense. If he wasn't, Dylan, if the Blazers weren't this bad on defense, he'd be on my all defense first team. Like he's been really that good. It's not his fault that this Blazers team is as bad as it is on defense. I'd blame it on a lack of like coherence due to injuries and COVID and whatnot. Like Nurkic just came back recently after breaking his hand, and then it's just a confluence of events. But the problem is it leads to a dire season. And right now the Mavericks and the Blazers are tied, I believe. And I think the Blazers do have the tiebreaker. But it's okay. No, the Mavericks are a half game back of the Blazers, but the Mavericks have one of the easier schedules going forward, and the Blazers have one of the more difficult ones. So there's a legitimate shot that the Blazers are in the play-in and the Mavericks are in the first round. So Dylan, I guess I'm going to start here. So this is the question every time everyone talks about Portland for the last, I want to say 4 years. This has been like the main talking point, but I think this is the time to actually discuss it. Is it the time to trade CJ McCollum? And I don't think this is CJ's fault. I have been known for not being that high on CJ McCollum, but I think he's actually really good. I think that this is by far his best season. I said that in the Detroit section. I think this is by far his best year. He is playing out of his mind on offense. He is such an amazing offensive creator. But the problem is those guys are just so small, right? Like, you can't have both of them and be an elite defense. And Dame has not really been good on defense at all this year. We don't really talk about it because we both agree point guard defense is kind of overrated. But listen, Dame is no one's idea of a stopper at the top of the key. And he's definitely not been doing that this year. And listen, Dylan, I just think that it might be time to just have Dame run the team, bring back Norm Powell for maybe a little bit cheaper, and just try to trade CJ for some wings. Like, I think Norm Powell can give you 75% of CJ's offense, maybe even like 85% of CJ's offense, and bring you a lot better defense. And then you flank them with better wings. And I think you'll be a better team next year. What do you think, Dylan?
Well, I'm going to take a page from your book and throw something at you. How the hell can this team fly if it doesn't have any wings? Okay? You need wings to fly, baby. and
That's good. That's good.
And listen, the last time we talked about Portland, I mentioned that I was tinkering with the idea of trading CJ because I'm like, Gary Trent Jr. is so damn good. Like, you can easily survive with him as your starting two, and whatever you get with CJ coming back, that like you might have a much more well-rounded out team. And I ended up just deciding, well, you know what? CJ he can run the bench so efficiently that maybe it's better for him to just stay. But, now that they have Norm Powell, and Norm Powell is better than Gary Trent as much as I love Gary Trent, if you can keep Norm Powell, then I say get rid of CJ and just beef this team up a little bit because, as you said, like, as good as CJ is, having him and Dame together on the floor, you're going to be great offensively, but defensively, it's just I think it's just too much of an issue, especially with the fact that every single team in the West has an awesome point guard. Like even the bad teams have an awesome point guard. So it's like, you got to have some sort of stopping power at guard, and they just don't. As much as those guys can put up on offense, it's like sometimes you're just going to have to match. And that's what we saw last year with Portland. It's like their defense was so bad. Dame had to fucking, just put on his combat boots and throw up as many points as he could because he had no other option. And they still weren't good enough, not even close to good enough for winning a series. So I think it's just time. And as I said last segment, like there's a lot of teams in the league that could use CJ, and he's going to be a great compliment on half the teams in the league at least. I mean, I'm just thinking of like right now, assuming this Victor Oladipo thing doesn't work out, how good would he be in Miami? Like that, they need a guard really bad. Last year, Goran Dragic was a huge piece of their run, and it just doesn't seem like he's going to be that guy this year. And Jimmy and Bam are still good enough where you can are still young enough. Mostly Jimmy, obviously Bam's young enough, but you could easily throw CJ in there and still have a title window open for a few years. So, and that's just one example of a team. I mean, hell, what would New Orleans give up for someone like CJ? Like you could name half the teams in the league and it would make sense. So I think there would be a pretty large market of bidders for a guy like CJ, and you're going to get some good pieces back. And, it may be even a good chance to get a little bit younger. Like you may get some wings that aren't necessarily completely developed yet, but they got a lot of upside. And, that I think that's where they need to look, because it's just, we've seen enough of this story. Like ever since LaMarcus left, it's been the same story all these years. And, it seems like Dame is going to stay no matter what, which I respect. But at the same time, like show him the same respect and start. And not to say they haven't made great trades. I mean, I think like getting Covington, great trade. Getting Powell, great trade. Even going back to Nurkic was a great trade. Like they've done a really good job of building this team. It's just, again, they haven't had that second superstar type of guy where they've been able to keep up. And, it's just, we know what CJ is, and he's not good enough. So it's time to move on.
All right. So I thought of a team. All right. Well, first of all, I think it's two teams. First case is the nuclear option. Okay. And this nuclear option is for a certain team in Los Angeles. So, okay. This trade only works under this specific circumstance. Okay. So let's just say the Clippers lose in the second round this year. And Kawhi decides, you know what? I've had enough of this. Going to Miami, taking my talents at South Beach. Joins Jimmy Butler, the guy he always wanted to play along with. I mean, CJ and a few picks for Paul George. That would be the nuclear option, right? I don't think that's going to happen because it requires a lot of stuff. But, CJ could definitely be your best player while you try to tank, right? Like, no disrespect to him, but if he's your best player, you're not winning a whole lot of games. Second option. And this one's a lot more favorable to the teams involved. It involves a favorite team of ours, the Memphis Grizzlies. All right. So the Justice Winslow experiment in Memphis. I really don't think it's going to work. All right. I think Kyle Anderson does everything that he does better. Less athletic, obviously, but still as capable on defense and is a lot better shooter. So the trade would be... So I actually, thankfully, somebody already did this trade, but I wouldn't do this exact trade. So the trade that they did was Winslow, Dylan Brooks, Tyus Jones, 2 first-round picks for CJ McCollum. Now, that's not the trade I would do. I would sub out Tyus Jones. I would instead ask for the 2 first-round picks for the Grizzlies this year, or I guess one of the guys was a second-round pick. I would ask for Tillman and Bain. Because you're basically getting equivalent value there. And I think it would make the Blazers a lot better. First of all, because you could slide in Tillman as your backup center. And the Grizzlies just don't need all these guys. You tighten up the rotation, and then you have Morant, CJ, Kyle Anderson, your first round pick this year. your team just makes a lot more sense if you're the Grizzlies. I mean, Dylan, I think CJ McCollum to the Grizzlies, I think that's probably one of the best landing spots.
Yeah, we've been trying to shoehorn a 2 in there for a while. And we talked about Terrence Ross. We talked about DeMar DeRozan. So CJ feels exactly what they need. And hey, guess what? Your backcourt defense is going to suck. Like, it's not going to change from the situation. But hey, unlike Portland, they have Jaren Jackson and Valanciunas and Kyle Anderson. They have a lot of other help. So I don't think the defense would be the same concern as it is in Portland. Not to say they don't have good defenders there. I just like what Memphis has more. And that's the thing that Memphis needs is a pull-up guy, because Morant just hasn't really done that yet. And I think that would be kind of the perfect counterbalance to Morant's game, while also giving them more space and just a little bit more veteran leadership for all their youth. So for them, it's great. For Portland, I still don't know what Winslow is. I don't really know. And it's like, if you're going to trade a guy like CJ, I feel like I would want a little bit more proven. And like, I like Bane, but that's nice to fill McCollum's spot. But I'm not sure. Like, I feel like I would want something a little bit more certain than Winslow.
That Winslow's on an expiring contract. I feel like Brooks, you're getting Brooks too. So you're getting, Brooks can be a 6-man. I think that you're probably right, but that's the only really salary, because you're not trading. Neither party involved wants to move JV, right? Like, the Blazers don't need him. I mean, you could argue maybe JV's better than Nurk, sure, but like, if it is, the difference is barely anything, as much as we've liked both of those guys. I think that I think it's probably the best option for them to recoup some like semblance of depth, because then, Bane is shooting 48, or I don't know what he's shooting. I haven't checked the stats in a while, but last we saw he was shooting 48% from 3 or something like that. And he's a good defender, right? Like, the problem is the salary wouldn't work without Justice. And I think that it's just not going to work in Memphis for Justice Winslow, right? Like, it's not his fault. I think it's just the situation for him isn't preferable, like, he's not really a shooter at all. He's basically a backup point guard there. Whereas if you put him in Portland, right, and you surround him with Norm, Covington, and Dame, I think the shooting concerns become lessened, if that makes sense, right? Like, even if you play him as the backup point guard and you have him run pick and roll, and you put Bane, Powell, and Covington as the flanking guys, or, you'll have a lot more shooting too. And Dylan Brooks, I feel like it's a lot more situational there, but I kind of agree with your sentiment there. The other thing I was considering, so San Antonio is probably going to not re-sign DeMar DeRozan, right? They're going to have about $50 million in cap space next summer. So if you're so you say you want to go for more proven guys, but I mean, what about Vassell and Lonnie Walker and like 2 first-round picks for CJ McCollum?
That's fairly interesting. Yeah, I like that a little bit more. Well, man, like, I like Bane more than Walker, but I like Vassell more than Winslow. So it's like, I don't know. It's getting closer, I think. Like, I still wouldn't be shocked if, like, I think Walker could be a good player. And maybe the problem is that they just have 6 guards on the floor at all times somehow, and it just doesn't really work. But I mean, I think Vassell is going to be really solid, like, off-ball player for a while. And like, we're talking about Sadiq Bey earlier. I think that's like those 2 guys, I think, could have similar careers, just knocking down threes for 15 years. So it's interesting. And the thing that's important to say, as maybe a counter to myself, is that I don't think you fix all their problems with just a CJ McCollum trade anyway. So perhaps just getting closer in some way and shoring up your defense to some level of respectability is a good start. And, maybe through free agency or something, you kind of patch up the rest of the holes. But, I guess, if you can get younger and add more depth and a little bit better on defense, it's probably a fair trade.
And like this to go back to Memphis. I know this isn't the Memphis podcast, but I think that it really, for me, it works for both teams because you add a bunch of depth of your Portland, right? And Portland's bench, I mean, really isn't good. I love Melo. You know, he's one of my favorite players ever, but it's just not getting it done at this point. And then you know, so you could either bring Brooks or Winslow off the bench, right? And then start the other one at the 3. Brooks is a sneaky 6'7". I don't think he's actually 6'7". I think he's like 6'5" or something like that. I think he's lying a little bit about his height, but listen, you know, whom's amongst us, right? I tell people I'm 7 feet tall all the time. Just kidding. But like, you just need something to like plug the holes, right? And I think you're exactly right. You just need to plug the holes and try to get yourself back afloat. Rather than trying, you're not going to get a player as good as CJ McCollum for CJ McCollum. Like, that's not going to be the case here. But if you can get, like, hell, if you could even get the trade that the guy proposed originally that I stole it from with Tyus Jones, you're getting two really good defenders in Brooks and Winslow, and you're getting a guy who can be explosive on offense in Brooks, and you're getting a really solid backup point guard in Tyus Jones. That's another area of need they have, which we haven't really addressed all year. But I mean, Anthony Simons, God bless him, he showed flashes during this week that I saw, right? I think he can be good, but the problem, he's so young. He's a guy that really needs G League reps instead of backup point guard reps to me. I think he needs to probably go down to the G League and just run free, right? But he can't. He's getting 15 minutes a game. That's just the problem to me. Like, this roster has so many holes, but they have such an ability to get the best out of guys, right? Like this, and that I guess that'll lead me to my next question, Dylan. If they don't trade CJ, is it time to move on from Terry Stotts? And I'll just say, I don't think it is. He gets the most out of teams that have no business winning 45 games every year. Like, this team is going to go like 44 and 28 or something. No, they're not going to go 48-4. They're going to go like 38 and 34, right? And this team will be like, with the way the roster's been all year, this team should have probably gone 25 wins, right? I think Terry Stotts has an ability as a coach to get the most out of rosters. And we've seen that for the last basically 10 years since he arrived after the Raymond Felton year. If you remember that Raymond Felton year where I'm pretty sure if you say Raymond Felton's name in Portland, someone will come and punch you. I don't think they like Raymond Felton at all. And I think that's the one. I think Portland's the one place where they don't like Jamal Crawford. I think that's the one place he played where they're not a fan of him there. But I think that Terry Stotts, to me, has just done such a good job of getting the most out of his players. And I think that, you know, he shouldn't be fired, but maybe they need to change of voice. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think Stotts is the problem at all. And it's just kind of funny. And like, we don't know everything about the way these teams are. Like, I was just thinking about Nate McMillan, and reportedly there were some locker room issues or whatever. I don't know. But I feel like winning has too much emphasis by a lot of people. And by winning, I mean like winning, getting to the finals. It's like not every team is a finals team. And the Blazers have, like, not to say they've really been close, because they got to the West Finals and did not stand a chance. But it's, as we just continue to say, the West is fucking hard. And hey, like, you know, you had 4 years where you had the greatest shooting duo on the same team. And hey, Kevin Durant also joined them for a couple of them. So it's like they keep, and now, you know, and then as soon as that's over, LeBron comes out West. Like, and Kawhi and PG, like there's just a never ending flow of superstars wanting to go out West. And of course, most of them end up in California. Shockingly, none of them end up in Sacramento, but that's neither here nor there.
Sacramento catching fucking strays today.
Hey man, they did it to themselves. But
shout out Harrison Barnes.
Yes, shout out to Harrison Barnes for sure. But hey, he's a guy that would be really nice in Portland.
Yeah, him too.
You know, it's just it's hard to win out West. And like, and we were talking about Dwayne Casey earlier too. Like, I mean, it's very clear that Nick Nurse was a great hire for the Raptors, but they probably would have won the finals with Dwayne Casey too. I mean, they had that close call against Philly, and maybe that small margin of error with Casey there instead of Nurse would have ended their year. I don't know. But I mean, Dwayne Casey was getting the Raptors to like a top 3 seed every year for a good amount of time. And Nate McMillan, like the Pacers roster overachieved basically the entire time he was there. And look what happens when he leaves. And of course injuries are part of it, but the Pacers fall and the team he takes over in the Hawks jumps up a bunch. So it's like, I feel like we underrate good coaches and search for great coaches, which I understand. And the next team we talk about is going to have another discussion like that. But it's like, there's some guys that are really good at getting you to the playoffs, and there's some guys that are better at winning in the playoffs. And I'm not sure if the Blazers' problems necessarily fall at Stotts' feet. And, maybe you get rid of him and bring someone else in, and that is what changes it. But it's just hard for me to look at the rosters across the entire conference and say, oh, yeah, the coach is the problem here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Great can be the enemy of good sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that you can take the next step. But look at the Pacers roster, right? And this is no disrespect to the Pacers, but like, they're not a championship roster. They don't have any superstars, right? Portland, you could at least kind of, okay, they have a superstar, but they haven't done anything that made the conference finals once. Well, they've made the conference finals, right? Which is tough in and of itself. They beat the Nuggets, who made the conference finals the very next season, right? And there aren't a whole lot of great coaches. That's the other thing. Like, most of these coaches are just good, right? Like, what did we think about Frank Vogel before? We laughed at the Frank Vogel hire. We thought like, oh, this is just a proxy hire. They're going to fire him and hire Jason Kidd halfway through at the All-Star break. That didn't happen. Frank Vogel is not going to be the Lakers, or he's not going to be fired anytime soon by the Lakers, barring catastrophic circumstances, right? They've been one of the best teams in the league, even in spite of not having LeBron James this year and Anthony Davis for a significant portion of time. Like, Stotts has done remarkable work with the Blazers. Like, he has really carried them to a level that they should not have been able to approach at all, especially, right? Like, think about what happened after LaMarcus left. How many people predicted them to make the lottery after LaMarcus left in 2015, right? LaMarcus left before the 2015-16 season. And then I'm pretty sure, I don't remember exactly where they finished. They were a playoff team, right? They've been in the playoffs. They have the longest playoff streak in the NBA. And they're tied with the Raptors, I believe. And if the Raptors miss the playoffs, they'll be in sole possession of the longest playoff streak in the NBA. Like, they've been good. And part of it was LaMarcus's, ability. But think about what happened the year after LaMarcus left, right? Wesley Matthews goes to Dallas, I believe. Nick Batum goes to, they trade Nick Batum to Charlotte for Noah Vonleh. That trade doesn't work out, right? Robin Lopez goes somewhere else. I don't remember where Robin Lopez has been around the whole fucking league at this point. So you basically have Dame and then CJ, who was coming off the bench the year before, who was the sixth man in 2015. And then you bounce back and you make the playoffs. Like, Stotts has just really shown remarkable adaptability with his rosters, which he's needed because Zach Collins, the 10th overall pick in 2017, has played like 100 games in the NBA. I think he's played about 2 seasons worth of games in the NBA. That's it. In 4 years. Like, the man has done remarkable work in spite of really shitty circumstances. So no, I don't think he should be fired at all. I think he's done a great job. I'm very much in favor of Terry Stotts keeping his job personally.
Yeah. And just another thing, and the ownership of the Blazers is the same that owns Seattle Seahawks, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the guy just
Paul Allen.
Yeah, Paul Allen. Like, look at the Seahawks. They don't fire people either. They've had, I believe, John Snyder's their GM and Pete Carroll for fucking ever. So it's like, and just looking at Neil O'Shea too as the GM of the Blazers, like, because some people may call for his head, but as we talked about earlier, like, he's done a great job of continually turning over this roster in the best way possible of trying to figure this thing out. And he's done a good job. It just hasn't worked out. And that's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of succeeding even. It's just that everyone else around them is better. And, you know, your Frank Vogel point was good because, and really it was the perfect point because, I mean, look what the Pacers were with Frank Vogel. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row. People were talking about how they had one of the best defenses ever. And really, if you look back at LeBron's run in the East, they were the most consistent and probably toughest challenge that he had the entire time. Like after he went to Miami, I should say, because, you know, Boston had their little time. The Bulls had one chance really, and they did nothing with it. And then Toronto did nothing. So the Pacers had they gave LeBron the toughest challenge in the East once he went to Miami. So basically you have 8 to 10 years of that's the best team. And as soon as Paul George gets hurt, Frank Vogel's not our coach. He's not our coach. He's not the guy. Like Paul George, let's look at this season. Paul George came back for 7 games. The Pacers were 1 game away from making the playoffs without Paul George. And that's just a testament to how good of a coach Vogel was. But as soon as Paul George gets hurt and, you know, they don't hold up to expectations, he's gone. As soon as he gets to a team that actually has the players, look, they win the finals in the first year. That just shows like the NBA is about the players. It's not about the coaches. The coaches can give you, you know, maybe 5% of a boost or whatever. And sometimes that 5% is enough to win the finals. But everything comes down to the roster. And the Blazers have had a good, not great roster. And so they've had good, not great results.
Yeah. And I real quick, I looked up the roster for the 2015 Indiana Pacers. Would you like to know who the leading scorer of that team was?
George Hill, probably.
Yes, that is correct. Would you like to guess who the second and third leading scorers were?
Oh gosh. Was Lance Stevenson on the team at that time?
He was not. That was when he was in Charlotte.
Okay. Man, who the hell? Rodney Stuckey?
He was third at 12.6.
That was a fun Rodney Stuckey year, by the way. The one fun Rodney Stuckey year there was, that was it. Man, it couldn't have been Hibbert. David West, maybe?
No, David West was fourth.
David West kind of sucked that year, actually.
This guy was a 3-point shooter, 3-point marksman.
I don't remember the Pacers having a 3-point marksman back then. Oh,
Lefty.
CJ Myles.
Yes.
Yeah.
He wasn't a 3-point marksman that year, but that's not, dude. I don't think that was his fault.
Yeah. That was a great George Hill year, by the way. Like that was the year, and it took Paul George being out to show it, because George Hill has been criticized his whole career for not being aggressive enough, which he deserved. Like he definitely wasn't aggressive as he should be. But that was the year he finally took over. And then the very next year they trade him for Jeff Teague, and the rest has been history since.
It's great. I think let's just go ahead. I think we spent way too much time on this question. Let's go ahead and move on to we can power through these next 2 questions. So what have you seen so far? So Norm Powell's a new addition, and Nurkic has come back healthy the last couple of weeks. He's been playing on a minutes restriction, but you have to think that'll be lifted in the relatively near future. What have you seen from? That was a really good Nurkic game last night, in addition to the really good Powell game you mentioned. Let's just start with Powell. What have you liked from Norm Powell so far?
I've liked from Norm Powell what I always like from Norm Powell is that he's an awesome player. I mean, like last night, and he's like this all, every night, but last night was really big because he had a great third quarter, especially, but just so active on both ends of the floor. Like he's such a ball hawk on defense for like jumping passing lanes, and he's really good at poking the ball away from a guy that's really not paying attention and just taking it down the other end. And that was a big reason why I think Denver had a tough time scoring in that second half, because Powell was just all over the place. And on the other end, we talked about this last time with Toronto, the first time we talked about Toronto, was Powell is just like it is impossible to stop him getting to the rim. It doesn't matter where the hell he could be tightroping on the baseline or coming with a head of steam from the top of the key. Like he's going to get to the rim and finish. It just doesn't really matter. And that's why I just thought that trade was so good for them, because as much as I love Gary Trent scoring, Powell gives them just another off the dribble threat. And, you know, they're going to lose in the first round, but it's going to be tough for whatever team they face to stop that trio of scorers they have, because there's just a lot of offensive versatility there. And Powell is just such a – we've seen it with him and Kyle Lowry, but he's such a great complement to an awesome point guard that attracts a lot of attention. And playing off of Dame now, and even CJ, like he just gets a lot of good looks, and you know he gets a lot of good open jump shot attempts too. So I've just continued to love his play this season.
Yeah, the drives point is an excellent thing. Like it feels like he can finish anything, especially attacking off a closeout. Like I pulled up the NBA.com stats and I pulled up the drives page. Currently so Dame is leading the team with 14 drives a game. Obviously, Norm has only played 14 games, but he's basically playing how he was in Toronto. 7.4 drives a game for Norm in 14 games. Pretty good number, you know, third behind CJ. CJ's at 8.1. So like, I feel like he's coming out. He's been very aggressive, like he's been all year, frankly. And the shooting's been down in Portland, but I think that he can still make shots when you need him to make shots. He was really hot in Toronto. I don't think anyone can deny that. But he was a little streaky too. But I think that Norm, to me, he's just going to be the guy that's going to make a difference. And he gives them a transition element that they really didn't have. You know, Dame and CJ are older now. Like Dame and CJ are almost like in their 30s or almost 30, right? In CJ's case. And CJ's been dealing with like a messed up back. So they're not really wanting to get out and run. But Norm, you can hit ahead in transition and he'll get a basket for you. So I really like what Norm's been doing for them. What about Nurkic? What have you liked from Nurkic so far?
Yeah, it's just been like a limited sample size of the whole Nurkic shelf. I don't know what the hell you call a collection of talents. Suitcase. I don't know. We got to come up with something, unless I'm just forgetting it. But I mean, he's averaging like 23 minutes a game this year, so you know it's just not been a lot. He's only played 23 games, so you know the scoring average is way down, and the passing and pretty much all the numbers. But I mean, like you said last night, we got a good showcase of the Nurkic we know and love. With like late in the game, he had it must have been Dame. He had a bounce pass from the top of the key to one of the guards down low. It was like the perfect pass, like right through a tight window. And it was like, that's what you like about Nurkic. And I was thinking about our discussion last week with the centers. And I'm like, if you put Capella on that team, like that pass is not being made, you know? And that's why I had Nurkic above Capella, because I just think his ability to pass, and I mean, we see it with Jokic, and obviously no one is going to equal Jokic's passing ability at the center position, but Nurkic is just a good example of like a still really good passer at the center position, what you can have. And when you have a bunch of shooting and cutters around you, like having a guy like that can pass is huge. And just having Powell there with dribble handoffs is going to be great too. And that's why it's so sad that we know the fate of this Portland team, because I just love this roster so much, and Nurkic is definitely a large piece of that.
Yeah, and like since he's come back from his injury, he's averaging 4 assists a game. He's only played 22 minutes, so you bump that up to 30. That's like 5 or 6 assists a game. I think that his assist production has been, you know, I have him on my fantasy team, so I'm monitoring him closely. He gets a lot of like 6 assist games, and he's on still a minutes limit. So once he's off the minutes limit, I want to see what happens. But last night against Jokic was probably his best defensive game he's played that I've seen, at least. He just was, you know, Jokic, he was really bothering Jokic. He was being really physical with him, which is what you need Nurk to do. But I think that, I don't know. I just feel like we're not going to relitigate the center debate. We just don't have time. I'm always a fan of Nurkic's skill set. Like, I called him basically Joakim Noah Redux. And if he can do what he did in the bubble last year, where he basically was the Portland's second best player behind Dame, then I think that they're in a great spot. But I want to see him. I want to see him with more of a minutes load. They really need to ramp it up because they only got like 14 games left. So there's not a whole lot of time for them to ramp it up. But he could be the difference in a Clippers series. Who knows? But I think let's go ahead, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and move on to our last Portland topic. And that is, I asked you, well, we're both going to rank these guards. And this is probably the toughest rank we've had. So rank these guards in terms of performance this year. And it is Dame Lillard, Steph Curry, CP3, Kyrie, James Harden. Now, Dylan, these are basically, I would say, the 5 best guards in the league this year, making it extraordinarily tough. I'll let you go first. Who do you have as your 5?
So I'll just say to start off that this is going to be a little bit different than my all-NBA team was, because I just have I look at these things differently depending on the question. Like all-NBA, it's basically pure production. But with ranking, I include some other things, and I'll discuss in the final 2 players why I made the decision I did. But so Steph, I mean, that's easy number 1 right there.
I probably could have left him off this list, but I wanted to include him just because.
Yeah, I mean, it's just whenever Steph's healthy, man, like he's gonna pretty much blow everyone away. Like the past few years, I mean, as much as we love Dame, I think it's pretty easy to say that Harden is like the only guy that's even been kind of close to Curry as far as production. I mean, and I'll just leave me right to the second guy. Harden is number 2. And I had a tough time a little bit because I wanted to put Dame there, but I'm like, man, Harden's efficiency has just been insane this year. And as soon as he got to Brooklyn, like they really started to flip that switch. And he's had a lot of help, but again, they've, as we discussed earlier, a ton of injuries. So unfortunately he's dealing with his now, but he's been having to deal with everyone else's injuries along the way. And he's done a really good job this year. And I think he would be more of an MVP candidate if he didn't burn Houston on the way out. Just for narrative's sake, I just would have a tough time voting for him because, it was just a bad look, and he just didn't seem to care for like the first month and a half of the year, and that's just not a good look. But that's not the discussion. So Dame number 3, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. He's just he's gonna die as a 30-point scorer. Like that's just what he is. It'll be on his gravestone that he averaged 30 points for his career. Like that's just who he is, and he's still doing it now. And then the last 2, this is where I had a tough time because I put Kyrie on my second team just because I think this has been his best all-around year. It hasn't been maybe his best scoring year. It hasn't been his best year as far as achievements, but I just think all around as a player, including passing and defense, I think Kyrie has had a career year. But, and there may be a little bias in this because I just watched the Suns, but I put CP3 ahead of Kyrie because just look at CP3 the past 2 years. That Thunder team was not supposed to be as good as it was. But because of CP3, they were a playoff team. This Suns team, people were like, yeah, they're maybe in 7th or 8th seed. No, they're the 2nd seed. And it's because Chris Paul has done the perfect job of setting these young guys up for success while also stepping in and hitting the shots down the stretch when they really need them. And I just think he's done such a great job of that. Like, he has really empowered both Booker and Ayton to do their own thing. He's willingly giving the ball to them so they can do their own thing. And I mean, Chris Paul has always been like a pass first type of guy, but there's not many superstars in the league that are going to join a team and just say, yeah, I'll step aside so you can be awesome. And like Jimmy Butler is really the only other guy I can think of that has really gone out of his way to do that. And CP3 this year has just been such a huge impact on everyone there. Like even Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, like all those guys are succeeding because Chris Paul is there. But again, when they need him at the end of the game, he shows up. So I just think the impact that he's had on that Suns team has just been amazing this year. And as good as Kyrie's been, I think I value a little bit more what CP3 has done for those around him.
This is distressing to me because, I love giving different answers than you. Unfortunately, I had the exact same 5. Listen, it's pretty cut and dried. I think your order is the correct order. I mean, Harden, before Steph went fucking supernova, he was the best guard in the NBA. Like, but then Steph, even since the All-Star break, has just been, when Harden was playing, he's just been better than that. So I can't add anything else to your list. I mean, really, we have the same one. So that's kind of boring. But, Dame, it's not Dame's fault that he's third. He's been playing out of his mind. It's just everyone else, like Harden and Steph has been better. And that's how it's been the last however many years, Like Dame's a top 10 player, but he's not a top 2 guard. And that's you usually can't say that about a guard. Usually, if you have a guard in the top 10, usually he's in the top 2. And Chris Paul in Phoenix, like, my God, it's a tour de force. He is going to be on my All-NBA team. He wasn't on my All-NBA team at the first half, but there's no way. And it sucks because Devin Booker's averaging 25 points a game, but Chris Paul just makes his life so much easier. And I think that's why you got to have him on the All-NBA team. And then Kyrie's been playing the best basketball of his life this year. I didn't think I'd say that, but he is. But he just isn't as good as those other guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, we ready to move on to the Bucks, Dylan?
Oh, yes. I'm ready.
All right. So they're 35-22, good for third in the Eastern Conference. They only had 3 games this week. So they're actually playing right now against the 76ers. I'm not going to bother to check the score, but it should be around halftime or somewhere around there. So on Thursday, they beat the Hawks 120-109. They then lost to the Grizzlies 128-115. And then they lost a nail biter to the Phoenix Suns. It was real close. It was a foul call that was kind of questionable. I'd probably lean towards it being a foul, but whatever. So they lost to the Suns 128-127. Dylan, let's just jump right into the big picture questions for this one. Have we seen any different approaches from Bud in this year's regular season?
I'm not going to act like I've watched every game and like nailed down on everything they've done, but everything I've seen is pretty much the same. And I think the only difference is just that Drew Holiday addition was that's where I'm seeing the biggest difference just in play style, because Holiday is just a different player than Eric Bledsoe. Holiday is just a lot more aggressive, and he seems like he just understands what he needs to do a lot more than Bledsoe did. So you don't have Middleton and Giannis kind of making up for that at the end of the shot clock or whatever. There's just a better understanding of how to do things now with Holiday there. But as far as scheme, I haven't seen a ton of differences. And the fact that you asked that question, I wonder if you've seen anything. But I was looking for some stuff, and there just wasn't anything that really stood out to me.
All right, so I'll tell you what I've seen that's different. It's kind of like a bullet points kind of thing. First of all, in crunch time, they're playing the Brook Lopez isn't out there at all, right? And this is coming off of the one crunch time game they had this week, which was the game against Phoenix, but that was a team that's on their level comparably. I would say probably Milwaukee's better than Phoenix, but so the closing lineup, right? They didn't close with Lopez. They closed with PJ Tucker, a trade deadline acquisition, rather than Brook Lopez. And they're kind of, what this allows them to do is it allows them to play more of a perimeter style on the pick and roll from what I've seen, right? They really are making an attempt to show on the pick and rolls rather than just playing excessive drop coverage, right? You don't have PJ Tucker out there to play drop, right? And you don't play drop with Giannis. From what I've seen, And then the other thing that I've seen on offense is that they run a lot more pick and rolls in crunch time with Giannis as the roll man. Like, and Drew Holiday in particular is really able to take advantage of this. Like in the Suns game, Drew Holiday was getting what he wanted off of the pick and rolls with Giannis because, I mean, Chris Paul is one of the best point guard defenders of all time, but off of the Giannis screen, it's hard to stick with, Holiday. I think that those two things, I'm really liking those particular changes. Not a lot else has changed, right? Like, yes, it still is the core tenets of, 4 guys out, 1 guy in. Giannis is the guy that's in, right? Like that's the core tenet of the offense. But I think that's the main difference I've seen, at least. I don't know if you would agree with that, like after me pointing it out, but I don't think they're going to get as roasted, like if they play the Heat this year, right? Like, I don't think they're going to, they're going to be as hard on Robinson, leaving, Dragic wide open to roast them, right? I don't know if that's going to happen again this year. It might because Bud, coaches tend to fall back on what they know best. But I think that there's a real shot that Bud may have learned his lesson and learned that his job is on the line.
Yeah, my thing is just that I don't think it should take crunch time for you to get rid of Lopez. And it's not only that they're getting rid of Lopez. I don't think Tucker should be the 5. Like I'm dead set on Giannis being the 5. Like until I see it not work in the playoffs, I'm gonna say that's what they need to do. And I have numbers for you because that's just how it works here. So, and this kind of leads into the next question with the closing lineup. So I did some digging through the lineup stats. And again, this is low possessions because Bud doesn't want to run Giannis at the 5 that much. But there's a lineup: Drew Holiday, Dante DiVincenzo, Pat Connaughton, Chris Middleton, Giannis. 66 possessions. What do you think the plus minus is?
I don't know. Plus 20.
37.8. And again, very low sample size. So, and if you scroll down on the lineups, there's some bad ones too that are even lower. So like, it's just when you have under 100 possessions, it's kind of hard. I think 100 possessions is a good place because that's basically a full game. So it's like, that's a good place to kind of get to. And 66 is not enough, especially at this point in the season. It's a very small sample size, but I just like the framework of that kind of lineup. And I've been going back and forth of whether I'd rather have Tucker or Connaughton out there. I actually think maybe it's depending on the team they face, but I actually think I would rather have Connaughton because I just think Tucker doesn't really give you anything on offense at this point. And I mean, Connaughton doesn't give you a ton either, but like he's a pretty reliable off-ball shooter. And I mean, on any given night, he could give you 3 to 4 threes, and that could be the difference maker. And Tucker like has to be in the corner, and otherwise it's not going to happen. And obviously there's the defensive stuff, but that lineup is so good defensively. I don't think you need Tucker. I think it may be a little bit defensive overkill to have Tucker out there. And you sent me some stats yesterday about Giannis in isolation versus Giannis as the pick and roll big man, and he's a little bit more efficient as isolation, but here's some counters. Okay. So first of all, pick and roll big man, he only has a 6% frequency for that. So 6% of his offense comes from him as the pick and roll big man. So he is putting up 1.01 points per possession in that, which is not great. If you look at Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, who are the 2 other like centers on the roster, Brook Lopez, 18% usage rate, 1.15 points per possession. Bobby Portis, 17.5% usage rate, 1.18. So that just makes me think if you use Giannis more in that role, he's going to score more. And I think that lower number is more of a lack of usage than lack of production, really. It's just another small sample size. And as you just talked about, Drew Holiday made a living out of throwing lobs to Anthony Davis. Why could he not do the same with Giannis Antetokounmpo? And Chris Middleton's good pick and roll too. He's just better at getting his own shot off of that. So I think you could even empower Chris Middleton more if you have Giannis out there as the lone big man, because he's just going to get fucking wide open threes all day. And we've seen what happens with that. He's going to knock him down. And if you have Giannis's guy kind of hedge, then Giannis has a wide open lane to the rim. And listen, Giannis is playing excellently right now, and he always has, or for the past few years at least. But you can close him off in the paint, and we see it in the playoffs every year. And against the Suns the other night, I think it was the end of regulation, he was, tunneling towards the rim, and he slips on the floor. And that just seems like it happens a lot. And if you are relying on him to get to the rim and he kind of has a double team and slips and fumbles the ball out of bounds, then you're going to lose. And there was another play earlier in the game where Phoenix closed him off. They had two guys in front of him. He tried to kick it out to, I think, Bryn Forbes, and he just way overthrew him. And that's just what happens. Like, if he gets shut down, he's got to find other guys, and sometimes the rest of the defense is just going to shut down those lanes. And I just don't think you can rely on him being the isolation creator the entire game. I think for the majority of the game, that's the way to go. We've seen that's good enough. But I just think we need to see a lot more of him as the pick and roll big man, because not only is it going to allow him to get to the rim easier, but it's going to empower Holiday and Middleton a lot more too.
That's a good point. My problem. Okay, so first question. Would you do offense for defense lineups, right? Like, let's just say you're in the last minutes of a game where you have, you're running Connaughton and DiVincenzo out there, and then you sub in Tucker for one of those two, if the other team calls a timeout, right? So let's just say Brooklyn calls a timeout and they call timeout, they're inbounding the ball on their side. Would you sub in Tucker for one of DiVincenzo and Connaughton?
Okay, here's the thing about Tucker. Tucker is undoubtedly a great defender, right? But we have seen over the past handful of years that the guys that they really need him to defend, he doesn't do the job that they want him to do. Like every time, whether it be LeBron, I guess in either conference is really the main one. But and then you can say, sure, he's not in the same conference as LeBron now, so it's not as big a deal. But, they still have Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler and KD and Harden in their conference and Tatum. Can he shut any of those guys down? I think he can make it harder for him, but he's been put in the spotlight before and just not done it. And it's not because he's a bad defender. It's because he's just not as a good defender as those guys are on offense. So I almost think I'd rather have Connaughton out there, because no one is guarding Connaughton at the 3-point line. He gets open all the time because he is the least important guy out there at every time. And even DiVincenzo is kind of too. When you have three awesome ball handlers, there's going to be help to the point where one of those guys get open. And if you have Tucker buried in the corner, there's probably going to be someone close enough to recover. Maybe he gets the shot off and it goes in. I don't know. But I almost think I'd rather have Connaughton or DiVincenzo just kind of moving around and floating away from the ball, because if they get an open 3-point shot, I just trust them a lot more to hit it. And at the same time, those guys are not bad defenders. They're smaller than Tucker, but it's not like they're just Doug McDermott. They're not going to give the guy a lane to the basket automatically. So I just don't think that it's that big of a trade-off from offense to defense to have either of those guys out there over Tucker.
Yeah, I could see that. I just think that you're probably not going to have Tucker guarding a main guy, right? And so I feel like you're not going to have any holes, right? Even if you have, it's just tough because Connaughton and DiVincenzo play completely different positions, so it's a different context. But in any case, I feel like the lineup versatility, right? If you're playing a bigger team, you can throw Tucker out there and he can muscle some guys, right? If you're playing a smaller team, you can have Connaughton out there and it'll be, completely fine. DiVincenzo is playing crunch time. I think he's earned it. He's been good.
Yep.
It's just, okay. The Giannis points you brought up are I concede those. My thing is Middleton. I think Middleton's improved enough. Like Middleton's assists this year have jumped to 5.6, right? And you have Drew Holiday with 5.5. Like, if you have those guys handling in the pick and roll and Giannis rolling, I think it'll be fine, right? Like because both of those guys are very skilled scorers. Drew Holiday's the criticism of Drew Holiday has never been about his ability as a scorer. It's never been about that. It's always been about his ability as a playmaker. But I mean, he doesn't have to be the primary one on this team. Like they're all basically the primary playmaker in essence. So I think that Drew, not being Eric Bledsoe is a huge plus, right? And not playing Brook Lopez in crunch time, I think will help them a lot too. I think that, first of all, Brook Lopez should be a 6-man at this point. Just full stop. Like, no offense to Brook, he's been a great player and he was really good for Milwaukee 3 years ago, but this isn't 3 years ago. He's 32 now. He's getting older as a center. I think that my lineup would probably be, I'd probably go Giannis, Middleton, Holiday, DiVincenzo, Tucker, and maybe even throw Portis out there. I think Portis has been good enough to maybe earn a spot out there, but I don't trust Connaughton. I'm sorry. I've seen it all these years. I feel like he leaves a lot to be desired when the game is on the line, right? Like, I feel like I could trust him in those 15 minutes you have him out there for, but after that, like he's playing 23 minutes a game this year, and I think that's just like the perfect regular season amount. I think that's going to probably get cut to 18 in the playoffs. Connaughton is a good shooter. Like, I feel like he's been one of the reasons, like he's really good in the regular season, right? But then in the playoffs, he just hasn't stepped up to the plate in the past 2-3 years. And he's really good. I like Pat Connaughton, but I think that, Tucker's been out there for, however long now, right? I trust him to hit shots more. And then Portis is just more dynamic offensively than either of them. I don't think he's as good defensively as either of those two, but I think that Portis, will definitely earn some crunch time minutes in the playoffs. But I think in the interest of time, because this one is running a lot longer than I think we both anticipated it would, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Is this the best we've seen Giannis play? And I'll just go off the bat. I say yes. I feel like he's gotten better, like with the touch inside. It's like subtle improvements for me, right? Like he's gotten better with the touch inside. He's a better passer than he used to be. You're right. He does still slip on the floor sometimes, but I mean, he's moving at the very fast with a very long body. I think that's bound to happen at some point. But what do you think, Dylan? Is this the best you've ever seen Giannis play?
Yeah. And he's in his prime. Like he's going to continue to be awesome at things he's been awesome at, and he's going to slightly improve in other areas. And I think the jump shot it's passable at this point, like you're not going to rely on that, but it's good enough where you don't love leaving him completely wide open. Like teams still do it, but he's proven he can knock it down at least enough. Like he's not airballing every time he throws it up like he used to, really. So yeah, he's awesome. And like that's why I'm excited for a future, whether Bud is there or not, of him actually being able to take it to that next level. Because I think the comparisons with him and LeBron are so, he has a much better team than LeBron did at this stage in his career, but it's a lot of the same criticisms. Like we knew how good LeBron was. Well, I'm not going to say we, because I was like 10. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but the people that did like knew how good he was. It's just, he didn't do it yet. And like, he did get to the finals pretty early on in his career, but he got blown out. And again, not his fault. And you could say the same thing about Giannis, like very similar game, like just doesn't have the jump shot, does everything else awesome. And let me just say, if he has the same career arc as LeBron and gets the jump shot LeBron has now, then he may have a similar run to LeBron with maybe not making 10 straight finals, but he's going to be tough to stop. But we're living in the moment, so we're not going to get ahead of ourselves. But yeah, for right now, I think he's definitely playing it at a peak level.
Yeah, I think that said it perfectly. If he ever can shoot like at all, then it's over for the league. I mean, where he's at now is fine, right? Like he's not. It's crazy that we can do this comparison, but inside he's not Zion, but I mean, he's probably the next best thing, right? Like he's shooting 79% at the rim on 450 attempts, right? Like the touch is absurd. Like you saw some of those shots he was hitting over Ayton. Like Ayton was playing ridiculously good defense.
Yep.
On Giannis. And it was probably the best game I've ever seen Ayton play, first of all.
Yeah.
And Giannis just was, it didn't matter because Giannis was just getting whatever he wanted inside for the most part. Ayton did stonewall him like a few times, but not anything significant. Like it took that kind of game to think that he was slowing Giannis down inside. So you're right. They can probably build a wall against him, but I feel like, again, this cannot be emphasized enough. Not having Bledsoe out there is a huge improvement for the Bucks. So
we could put a billboard up and it still wouldn't be enough. We could write it in the sky with a plane. It cannot be emphasized enough.
That's going to be terrible for the environment, right? Knowing what we know about like fuel and stuff, like writing that with the exhaust smoke in the clouds.
Well, is that actually what it is though?
Is it? I don't know enough about the subject.
I have no idea. I mean, I would like to think that high, you could just squirt out water and it would turn like that. But I don't understand science at all, so who the hell knows?
Yeah, we're not science majors, we were journalism majors. So
exactly.
On our last topic for the night. So we're gonna do what we did with the Jazz last week, and we're gonna rank our chances of beating the top teams. Except we did throw some Western Conference teams in there because we realized that there's a lot better chance of the Bucks making the finals than the Jazz. So let's go ahead and start in the conference. And the team that they would play in the second round right at this moment in time would be the Brooklyn Nets. So Dylan, what % chance did you give the Bucks of beating the Nets?
So I actually gave it an even 50-50 split because, I mean, first of all, like it's just impossible to look over Brooklyn's injuries. And one of those guys going down automatically tilts it in the Bucks' favor pretty significantly. But even if they're healthy, I actually like the matchups for the Bucks a lot. And this is a series like when I say I want Giannis at the 5, I don't mean for 48 minutes a game. I just mean more than he is now. But against the Nets, they could do it for 48 minutes because the Nets run so small. And if you have Giannis at the 5, like if I'm the Nets, I don't think I want to go small against the Bucks because I'm not going to say it's a better opportunity for the Bucks than the Nets because the Nets have a lot of talent, but the Bucks, I don't know, man. The Bucks might beat them if the Nets want to go small. Like, I mean, just think about the defensive matchup. Like, I mean, watching Drew Holiday play defense is just – we saw what he did against Damian Lillard a few years ago, right? He could do that same thing to Kyrie. I'm not saying he will, but he could. And, Harden, you're not going to shut him down, but you could throw one of those guys at him, Middleton or something, and it's not going to be easy. All those other guys out there, like you could put Giannis on KD or one of the other guys, Tucker, and, you're going to have a decent chance. Like you're not going to stop them, but just as far as matchups, like I think the Bucks would have probably the best chance in the conference of matching up defensively. And I mean, we know that the Nets aren't a great defensive team and they're better than they were, but they're still not great. And I mean, I just wouldn't be shocked if in a 7-game series, Drew Holiday outplayed Kyrie Irving. Like I'm not expecting it, but I wouldn't be shocked. And if that happens, then it gets a lot tighter. So I think it would be a really close series.
I mean, we don't even have to go back to the Damian Lillard series, Dylan. Did you watch the Hawks game last week?
I did not, but now I want to.
Yeah, Drew ate Trey for lunch, and Trey is another guy that went down. I think he had a grade 2 ankle sprain, but I think he'll be back soon. So I don't think that's big of enough a deal for us to cover. But yeah, Drew ate Trey for lunch, man. Like it wasn't. I went back and watched all of Trey's field goal attempts, and it was just brutal because he either had. So this is another thing, right? Like he either had Drew trailing him, right? Like on the pick and roll after, Capella sets good screens, but Drew is one of those guys that can fight through most any screen. and get over the top and do what he needs to do. And then they had like, and Trey defaults to floaters. He doesn't go for layups. So Brooks' length actually bothered him. So it was actually kind of a perfect game plan, and kind of why I don't think the Hawks can actually beat. I don't think the Hawks can get a game off of any of the top teams in the conference. But let's go. I had the Nets at a 40%. I think the Bucks have a 40% chance of beating the Nets, because I think the top two guys on Brooklyn, whoever they are just more explosive than the Milwaukee guys. But I can't discount Milwaukee's size, right? Like Middleton and Giannis are going to be bigger than most of the guys that Brooklyn is going to try out there. So I think it has potential to be as good as the second round series between the Sixers and the Raptors a couple of years ago. I think it legitimately can be that great. It's going to be the best second round series in a while, or not in a while, because that second round series was 2 years ago, but it's going to be one of the great second round series, I would say.
Yeah, and another thing that we didn't even I don't know how this slipped through, but we didn't talk about LaMarcus Aldridge. Or was that did we talk about that last week?
That was last week.
Okay, I'm sorry. I lost track of time with that. I thought it was since then, but LaMarcus Aldridge is in that series. I think that would be a huge difference having him at the 5. Like seriously, in the 2 weeks that he played with the Nets, I thought his defense at the rim was good. And having a guy that's just that tall defending the rim, like I think he would give Giannis like at least a tougher time of making those shots. And, I guess you could say Nick Claxton could do that, but I don't know. Nick Claxton's very young and inexperienced, and we know DeAndre Jordan's not doing it. So that LaMarcus Aldridge thing is that could be like the difference maker in that type of situation.
Yeah. And LaMarcus was packing on 250, and I'm guessing that was probably lighter than what he actually weighed. 250, they seem to give 250 to anybody. Like, I don't think that all these guys actually weigh 250. Like, what do they have Giannis at? I'm curious. They have Giannis at 242. There's no way he's 242. He has to be like 260. Like, that man is ripped.
See,
I think
it's tough for the tall guys because like they look skinny, but it's like, well, maybe they would be 240 if they were 6'7", but when you're 7 feet, you got to add some weight on there.
Like, I'm going to go to the Milwaukee Bucks team page because we're going to get, because there's no way he actually weighs only 242. That feels like a couple years ago. I'm going to look at the, I just feel like there's no way he's only 242, right? Like, I know Basketball Reference can be kind of weird about that. So they have him at 242. So apparently he weighs 242 pounds. I'm calling bullshit, but with how he moves, it doesn't move like 242. It moves like 280. So that could be a series where Giannis averages like 35 points a game, I feel like. And I really hope that series happens. Right now, Brooklyn's a half game behind Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is kind of going through their own injury problems. But if Philadelphia has a tiebreaker over Brooklyn, so if Philadelphia finishes tied with Brooklyn, they'll finish as the first seed. But speaking of Philadelphia, Dylan Hughes, your percent odds of the Bucks beating the 76ers?
I'm saying 35. See, this is a series where I don't think I want Giannis playing the center that much because he has to deal with Embiid. And that's just a lot of wear and tear. I mean, Embiid is going to trash anyone, including Giannis, most likely. But knowing that, you don't want to throw Giannis in harm's way like that. And Brook Lopez is the perfect guy to do it, man. Throw him in the fire. And just size-wise, I actually think Lopez could do something against Embiid. I mean, Embiid's good enough on the perimeter where he would probably just drag Lopez out there and beat him off the dribble or something. And by the way, that's another reason to not have Lopez on there. He got switched on to Devin Booker the other night and just lost him. And thank God Giannis was back to block the shot. But as soon as I saw that, I'm like, yeah, get this dude out of here. But yeah, man. And Philly and Milwaukee are just very similar in that they don't have the Golden State shooting. So the shooting that we have seen win titles over the past few years, neither of these teams have, from their star players at least. And that's just why it's an interesting test case almost to see if one of them can eventually break through and make the finals without it. But it's I just think Philly's size is going to be too much. And I mean, I think Milwaukee can match up with anyone defensively, but Embiid is just another case, and there's no one in the East like Embiid, and it's just hard to match him. And you're gonna have to do it elsewhere, and the Bucks definitely could, but I don't know. I just like how Philly's played this year and how Tobias Harris has played. Like Tobias Harris is like, I think he's the X factor, because if he can play like he's been playing this year, he makes it a lot tougher to knock them out. So I just think Philly has been a little bit too good this year, and Embiid has been a little bit too good this year for Milwaukee to handle.
So, okay. I had a 50-50 shot. I think that it's okay. I understand where you're coming from with the Embiid stuff. However, neither of us, I think it's safe to say, trust Danny Green in a series. And Ben Simmons, as much as we love him, hasn't been a particularly effective playoff player, right? So if you get it to Embiid in the post, why don't you just throw Giannis down there to double him, right? Like, Embiid, it's going to be a tougher double team than Embiid usually deals with. A, B, you throw Middleton on Tobias, and that, I'm not saying it neutralizes it, but you probably get 75% of what you get from Tobias. Tobias does have a size advantage, but you're not going to throw it in the post to Tobias when Embiid's right there, right? And then I would just leave Danny Green open. Like, I know that hasn't been an effective strategy in the past for much of NBA history, but he's 34 years old. Or he's 33, excuse me. He's going to turn 34 by the time these teams play each other, probably. If they play each other. I think that Philadelphia can get beat. I think Philadelphia is a very fallible team. First of all, I think Milwaukee's roster is just playing better than Philadelphia's. That's point A. I do think Embiid is more explosive than Giannis, but I think Giannis is better than Embiid. Like, I think that Giannis, just throw the length at him, right? Have Giannis play free safety, because you don't have to guard Ben. Like, what if you could throw it to Ben, and if you throw it to Joel in the post, why do you have to guard Ben on the perimeter? That's the time old question, right? Like, and we'll see if Doc can, actually answer it with some effective options. But like, I just feel like you don't have to guard Ben Simmons. So that neutralizes that, right? What are you going to do? Throw him in the dunker spot like they have in every other playoff? I think that Milwaukee, and then you throw Drew Holiday on Seth Curry, and you neutralize Seth Curry. I think that's probably the way to go. But I think, listen, Joel has just been a monster. I want to see if he can keep it up in the playoffs, because he traditionally hasn't really been able to. And I want to see Ben and Joel in the playoffs. That's really the question du jour. We'll have the Sixers next week, so we'll be able to answer some of these. We'll have some Sixers questions next week. But I don't know. I think that the Philly matchup, I think that I'd say it's right down the middle. I could see it really going either way.
So I just translated everything you said in my head right now. And what it's spitting back out to me is that you think that if Philly still had TJ McConnell, this would be an easy decision. But without him, it's 50-50.
Trust the process. That's all I got to say. I mean, TJ McConnell, I really want to see him in a playoff series, because I really want to see what they would do about his shooting, as outside shooting. But
I mean, he was better than Ben Simmons a few years ago. Like I think they eventually went back to Simmons, but like they benched Simmons for TJ McConnell. Like, that is legitimately something that happened, and it helped. Like, TJ McConnell is, I think, one of the few players in the league that has just not succumbed to his lack of shot. Like, everyone else seems to struggle with it. And I don't know, like, TJ McConnell just figures it out somehow. And we haven't seen him a ton in the playoffs, but we did for a little bit. And like, he was pretty good. And I think he's gotten a lot better since coming to the Pacers. So for future's sake, I'm very interested to see that.
Can I also present a little bit of statistical evidence on Hughes?
Oh, yes.
So I pulled up StatHead, the comparison site. So Giannis Antetokounmpo in games between these two, they've played 8 games against each other. 34 points a game, 14 rebounds, 6.6 assists on 53% from the field. Joel Embiid, 26.5 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks. They're each averaging about 2 blocks on 39.8% from the field. So I just feel like the Bucks are a bad matchup for the Sixers, but then you throw Simmons on either Holiday or Middleton, and it's over. You basically are taking them out of the game. So it's really going to be fascinating. Like the Eastern Conference playoffs are going to be fascinating for the top 3 seeds, and then also when the Sixers destroy the Hawks in the second round, it's going to be fascinating to see. But I think it's time to move on to our next team, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. So they're the presumptive favorites to make it out of the West, as we both know. I'll just go ahead and give my percentage for the Lakers here. I have it as a 35% chance they beat the Lakers, just because I don't know about the Lakers' health. If the Lakers are fully healthy, it's a 15% chance, and that's probably high. So what do you have for the Lakers?
Yeah, I went with 30. I mean, it's just I think the Bucks recipe for success is being the bigger team, and that's why I think Philly beats them, and that's why the Lakers easily beat them. I mean, hell, having Drummond and AD, there's no fucking way the Bucks keep up with that. Like I think the Bucks succeed when they have the advantage with like the smaller guys, or it's at least close, and then Giannis can push you over the top. But when with all that size down low, there's just no way.
Yep, couldn't said it any better myself. Let's go ahead and move on to the next team. We can kind of buzz through these next 2 teams before we get out of here. All right, the Los Angeles Clippers. I gave the Bucks a 60% chance of beating the Clippers because they have a massive size advantage against the Clippers. And then Kawhi is going to be tough, right? Kawhi shut down Giannis the last time they played. But I mean, you stick Middleton on PG and you neutralize PG, right? And then what guards do the Clippers have that are on Drew Holiday's level? So I think the Bucks, it's crazy to say, they have more firepower than the Clippers, and I would favor the Clippers, the Bucks. Who would you favor in that series?
Yeah, I said 60% for the Bucks as well. I mean, listen, if it's going to come down to Reggie Jackson and Drew Holiday, I think everyone knows who we're picking. I mean, like Kawhi and PG, that's all the Clippers really have. And again, matchup wise, I just think the Bucks could easily overcome that. I mean, maybe not easily, but they could overcome that. And Drew Holiday is like the cherry on top. So I would be surprised if the Bucks didn't pull out of that one.
And so let's go ahead and move on to the Nuggets. I gave the Bucks a 55% chance of beating the Nuggets. I feel like the Nuggets don't really have anyone to guard Giannis or Middleton or Holiday. And I think that kind of gives them the edge. I do think Jokic gives them problems. And a Jokic like Barton, even 2-man game would give them problems. Barton was really good against Portland yesterday. But what do you have for the Nuggets?
Yeah, I said 55% as well. I mean, pretty much the exact same reasons. Like Jokic is going to cause problems, and if Jamal Murray was in there, it's a different story, I think. I mean, Drew Holiday could still very easily win that battle, but Drew Holiday guarding Will Barton, it's that's kind of like a wrap up on that.
And then our final one, I think this one is going to be madly disrespectful. A team we talked about last week, the Utah Jazz. I gave the Bucks a 75% chance of beating the Jazz. I don't think Gobert can stop Giannis. I don't think the Jazz will make it this far, first of all. We're both very low on the Jazz. And I think that Drew can take out Donovan. I think that's really all you need to do against the Jazz. I'm pretty sure if yours isn't at least as high as mine, I will be shocked. What do you have for the Jazz?
Well, I actually only have it at 60%.
Wow.
Just because of I have PTSD of the Heat series last year where the Bucks just couldn't decide who to guard on the 3-point line and it killing them. And this Jazz team has thrived off the 3-point shot. So the only reason I give them that much of a chance is because I could see the Jazz getting hot from 3 enough where it gives them a shot, but ultimately the Bucks just kill them talent wise.
That, you know what? That's fair. I think on that note, it's time to wrap up. From one young soul to another. I'm not even gonna do it this week. I can't top what I did last week. Like I think it was so perfect. Dylan, I just can't muster the energy to find something better than that right now.
I mean, you know what? Why fix something if it's not broken? I think we've cracked the code on how to threaten people properly to buy the book, and that was it. And you know what? If you didn't hear it, then go back and listen. And there's just no way you can avoid buying the book at that point.
That's right. You'll be scared straight, as they say. Divine Rhyme, Dylan Hughes. You guys did. You and Will Hogsett did 2014 Forest Hills Drive this week. How'd that go? Tell the audience how that went.
It's very good, man. Me and Will are we're clicking. We're clicking, man. And J. Cole is like the perfect guy for us to start with. And this week was kind of special because it was like the prior two pods just built perfectly into this record, and like having the context for this record now that we didn't really have before was really nice. And I thought it was a really, really good, deep discussion. So very, very much a must listen.
And I agree. It was a very good pod. Make sure you go check it out. I'm really enjoying the Divine Rhyme the section of the podcast. It's been really a great addition, going as well as I thought it would. So make sure you go check that out. Linsanity will be back next week. I believe Zach Griffith will be joining the crew on Mondays for their podcast, and Caleb might be doing 2 Linsanities a week. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Triple Option Pass, they'll be back. Well, they'll be out the same time that we are tomorrow. They'll be doing the defensive prospects. And then next week, they're going to be doing a first round mock draft. So make sure you check that out. Circle City Cinema, I was on there for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'll be on there for a recap this upcoming week. So make sure you check that out. He'll be doing 2 Oscar shows, one with his friend Coop, and then another like previewing the show. Then he'll be doing a live Oscar show. I'm really scared of that one. But listen, Maximum Chaos, that's all I'm here for. So make sure you go check that out. Check out the live Oscars pod when that's put out. Dylan Hughes, do you guys have a date? Zach found out on the podcast, so I'm very happy that he listened and found out. He said it was a great way to find out. So you'll be on there very soon, right? The new Parasite.
Yes, I have not told him when yet, because frankly, I don't know what the hell is happening in my life right now. I just kind of wake up and figure stuff out. So I'll set a date eventually, but I know my time is coming, so it'll be soon.
Make sure you check that out when he's on there. Your co-host Will Hogsett was on the Battleground this week, and it was a great episode. Make sure you check that out. Will brought the hot takes. So he calls LeBron LaFraud, which I thought was absolutely fucking hilarious. I'm not even gonna lie. I think LaFraud is one of the funnier names. I think Way Off P is my absolute favorite, but I don't think anything can be better than Way Off P. But make sure you check that out with Bryce, JD, and Zach. And then our teams for next week, Dylan Hughes. It's the Clippers, the Bulls, and the 76ers. So that's going to be a fascinating week, especially with the Bulls in a tailspin. I think I covered all my bases here. I did. So Dylan Hughes, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.